and we traveled on that one for the first time, 60 days in Alaska, through Alaska, as guests.
60 days.
60 days, yeah.
So when you leave home, what sort of problems do you foresee that you have to take on? Like, you got to shut the water off, you got to find the neighbor girl to come collect your mail or whatever. What sort of drama does that entail?
The biggest one is getting the lawn mowed.
Getting the lawn mowed. Welcome everybody to the first episode of Ernie's Go RVing with Ernie's. This is kind of just a little documentary series of what other RVers have done and the lessons they might have learned along the way. And today I would like to introduce Nancy and Mel Suddeth. They've been customers of mine for almost 20 years, and I really appreciate following along with some of their adventures. I call them a friend, and we've had a lot of good stories over the years, and I am just bringing them on to kind of share their journeys and adventures with us. I'd like Mel to go ahead and introduce himself.
Good morning, I'm Mel Suddeth. I'm not sure just what to say. We've been in RVing, we've had two different RVs, a 34-foot diesel, front-end diesel, and now we've graduated to a 40-foot rear-end diesel pusher, and we're looking for a 36-foot to move back down a bit.
And Nancy?
I'm Nancy. I'm a retired Army nurse. I'm a nurse practitioner. I started RVing in 2012, camped as a child. My parents had a camper, and during the winter we generally ski. I used to work at White Pass as volunteer in the aid room.
Great. Some of the notable things I liked about Mel and Nancy, and part of Nancy's adventure is she's a cancer survivor, and Mel had a heart operation done and had, what was it called?
TAVR.
A TAVR valve put in, and both of them didn't let that slow them down. And a little quote Nancy shared on her Facebook page that I followed years ago said, someone with terminal cancer once said, "Don't be sad for me. We all come into this world to be a tourist and enjoy life going sightseeing. Do good deeds, just so happens to leave earlier than others." Nancy and Mel have been sightseeing for as long as I've known them and just enjoy the world. And they have so many wonderful stories to tell. They probably have forgotten more sights than I've had an opportunity to see. And I just admire that about them. And I kind of live vicariously through them because I follow Mel and Nancy on Facebook. And they've seen some things that I just dream about getting an opportunity to bring my grandkids someday to see these wonderful sights in the United States. Some of the more notable ones that Mel and Nancy have been to are the Rocky Mountain National Park. Mel's got a picture of him sitting up on the top of the Continental Divide at the sign, just smiling as Nancy's taking a picture. And they've been to the Great Stands National Park. They've been to the Balloon Festival in Albuquerque. They actually have worked it a couple years and been doing the event. Been to the Petrified National Forest, or Park, not forest. I guess it's a forest at one time. Calver's Big Tree State Park, and many, many years as volunteers at White Pass. They've seen the Northern Lights. They've seen sunrises. They've spent many a Christmas as a volunteer up there helping out at White Pass over the Christmas season to be prepared for the big mad rush of all the oncoming skiers. And I thought that was pretty admirable to spend your Christmas at White Pass at the ski lodge. And then they've also, in the last several years, become guides for a tourist, a travel company that goes throughout the United States. And we won't mention them today because there's lots of them, and I don't want to advertise for them or have anything said that we might have misquoted. But they've been to Alaska up the Alcan Highway. They've been to the Southern Parks Tour. They've been to Albuquerque. They've been East Coast, West Coast, North, South, and cruises and many trips in between. And I'm going to let them kind of let us know a little bit about some of maybe their favorite adventures.
One of my favorite adventures is going to Slot Canyon in Page, Arizona. We did that as part of the Western National Parks tour last year. And it's just really a cool, it's the picture you see where the light reflects off the rocks, and the light reflects off the rocks naturally. It is not anything to do with people having flashes or anything like that.
It's kind of like bioessence. It's just different.
Yeah.
And you're walking through a canyon that may be shoulder width wide, looking up at all these eroded rocks that Mother Nature's formed all of this.
Yeah.
That's why they call it the Slot Canyon. It's really cool.
So this Southern Parks tour, how long did that adventure last for you guys this year?
This year it was 34 days.
34 days. So when you take a 34-day adventure, there's a lot of preparing. You got to get ready to do something like that.
Yeah. So the company that we work for, when you do a caravan tour, and that is where you're driving from place to place. The Western National Parks, we do all of the national parks within the Four Corners area. So we did Bryce, Zion, Monument Valley,
North and South.
Grand Canyon, and you're usually there. This one is you're there 3 or 4 days, so you can explore all you want. They also have tours that are included, and we also then cook for them. Not every meal, but a lot of the meals. And
one of the admirable things is, what time of year did you guys go to this Southern Parks tour?
Yeah.
This year it was August 20. We started August 24th. It was hot.
We had just come back from Alaska.
Yeah.
60 days in Alaska.
So what was some of your more memorable adventures, Mel, that you can remember out of some of the places that people might go, I want to go there someday?
I think the most exciting one was out of Valdez and out of Haines, Alaska. We saw whales bubble feeding, bubble netting, where they go down and they blow bubbles and create a bubble net, and then they come up through it.
So you guys were on a chartered whale watching boat, and you came across gray whales, I say?
No, they were
humpbacks.
Yep.
Humpback whales, and they were floating around trying to catch krill, or was it herring? Herring.
Yep. They were feeding on fish.
Yeah.
But we were traveling from Haines down to Juneau by boat and then back.
Yeah.
And that was an all-day trip. It was our people, our caravan group, alone on the boat. And in fact, if you watch Dr. What's her name? Oakley, Yukon vet, she travels on that same boat to do her vet clinics at various villages outside where they can't get to by road.
Yeah.
So it was a fun experience.
Yeah.
I tell you, one of my most exciting periods coming down, 8 mile downgrade, about 6% mostly, our brakes heated up because I didn't at that time realize or understand how to downshift the transmission and ensure transmission was downshifting to retard our speed. And it was very scary. So that's something I want to comment on, is you really need to know your rig and how to control it and how to drive it. I don't necessarily consider myself a good RV driver. Well, that's not true. I'm a good RV driver, but I don't know everything I should know about my rig.
You're always learning.
Always learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how many years ago did you guys start traveling together? I know this has been a while.
2012.
2012. Where was your first adventure to? What got you guys to go, let's get out and start RVing together? What sparked that interest as a team?
I was retiring
You were
the first time. And I always wanted an RV. My sister had one, and I had traveled with them a few times. The first trip that we did, we had in 2012. I bought our first rig 3 weeks before I retired. It was my retirement present. And the first trip we did was with my sister and brother-in-law in their rig. We went to the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta.
And what they're not saying is, some people are fans of Fords, and some people are fans of Chevys, and some people are fans of Dodges. These two are a very huge fan of Tiffin.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to feel a warm cup of love, all you do is call the lady at Red Bay at Tiffin in Alabama, and she picks up the phone and she goes, "Hello, how y'all doing today? Can I please help you?" And you just want to call her, and it's just a cup of warm sugar that pours out into your soul. And these two have loved their Tiffin RVs. They went from one to another. And on some of your tours, most of the people that were on the tours drove Tiffin RVs also, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Our trip last year to Alaska that we guided was all Tiffins. And that was quite a challenge to fit these. And most of them were 40 footers.
40,
to
45
fit,
foot.
And to fit them into these rural campgrounds in Alaska. Yeah. And they and only 30 amp. So it was a challenge, but we had a really good time. That's one of the things that I'd like to say is that if you ever, when you buy whatever rig you or manufacture, join their club and travel with folks that have the same manufacturer as you, because you learn so much from all of them. Some of them have been doing it a long time. Some of them are just starting, so you can share your knowledge and they can share theirs.
Right. So what got you, I just had a side note on that, Mel. I wanted to go back to you. What got you inspired with Nancy to hit the road? Because I know she started this crazy journey, and then you fell in love with it too.
Her sister and brother-in-law had one. We went to the Albuquerque Balloon Festival with them. I guess that was actually after we bought. But I had no intention or desire to buy a motorhome. I wanted to travel. And then we got together and got married and decided that would be a good way to go. And I had to do it. I was recruited into it because she'd already bought her rig.
It was kind of that voluntold type thing. If we're going, get in or stay home. I don't care.
That's it.
Yeah. You and the dog get in or stay here.
Well, where was the next great adventure that you guys was? When did you get into these big, epic, month-long journeys? For me, going for a weekend is a massive overtaking. Going for a week is a lot. There's so much that compiles. What inspired you to do these long, month-long and 2-month-long journeys?
At that point, if I may, I'm going to have to say the name of the company we're now working for, which was Fantasy RV Tours. They have tours all over the country, all over North America, in fact, all over the world. But we enjoyed our trip to Alaska, a trip to balloons in Albuquerque, followed by a trip we were in our own rig, following with
Margaret and Bill, my sister.
Her sister and brother were on the trip. It was an RV tour, and we traveled on that one for the first time, 60 days in Alaska, through Alaska, as guests.
60 days.
60 days, yeah.
So when you leave home, what sort of problems do you foresee that you have to take on? Like, you got to shut the water off. You got to find the neighbor girl to come collect your mail or whatever. What sort of drama does that entail?
The biggest one is getting the lawn mowed.
Getting the lawn
get
mowed.
The homeowners association on your back. and think about what you're leaving behind and how you're going to take care of it if you have to while you're on the road. And on the road, be sure that you have the right things you need. Nancy will talk more about this. But we learned that traveling through Alaska, the way we were doing it with a group, traveling from one town to another every 2 or 3 days, we had overpacked food. We probably took out 80% of the food we had packed when we left home when we got back home. Some of it's still on the shelf and we haven't eaten. Because there are so many stores and towns you're going through. So you can always find the food you need generally, but pack enough to get by, which is really different than a family going out to take their kids to the lake for a week. There you have to take all your food with you. So it's quite a different way to travel. Our second trip after Alaska was to the Maritime Provinces, which was also in the order of 60 days, where we traveled all the way across country to Bar Harbor, Maine, from where we kicked off to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland on a ferry over to Newfoundland. Traveled all.
You took your boat on the ferry to Newfoundland?
Our motorhome.
Motorhome, not.
Yeah. and that was fun. And a couple of the things we did there was they have a tradition that when you get there, there's a party and you kiss the cod. They have a codfish and you kiss the cod.
Did you guys get to see icebergs on that journey?
Yeah.
We did.
Did you get to float with the icebergs?
We traveled around an iceberg.
Really?
It was just a spectacular scene.
Yeah. The difference in the icebergs over on that side of the coast versus the Alaska side of the coast, they're more, they wander. And the ones, you just get the glacier fall off a little bit in Alaska, but you don't see near it, because I worked in Alaska for a little while and I never seen any glacier or iceberg type stuff floating in the water besides the ice buildup.
Yeah.
That's right.
The one that we saw this giant one, but then we also saw one that had floated, like you were talking about, and we got a picture of it, and it was in a village, and it had floated to this point, and it was sitting just outside this village. So I have a picture of it with the homes, the small homes, with the iceberg in the background.
Wow.
That's fun.
It was cool.
Yeah.
Our first view of the iceberg, the big iceberg, as we were coming towards it by boat, a whale had gone just past it and
Breached, huh?
breached and then rolled, and its fin came up. Unfortunately, none of us were prepared. We didn't get it on picture. That was stunning.
Your mental picture's there forever, but the evidential picture got missed, huh?
It was fun.
So 60 days, I mean, that's like going, okay, I'm giving up on this life for a little while in Olympia or Lacey and taking off to the great unknown. It's almost like a Lewis and Clark adventure. It's like, you're in St. Louis and you're getting ready to migrate to the Oregon Trail or something like that. It's one of those, you don't know what to bring. One thing comes to mind, both of you have had medical history problems. How do you, because when I go to the pharmacy, my medical prescription's usually only good for 30 days. You got to overcome some of those small hurdles like that. I assume, or do you go to your doctor and go, hey, this is what I'm doing, just stock me up?
Well, we do that. We get our medical through the military, so they give us 90 days on those prescriptions on a regular basis. But sometimes we'll have to let them know that we have them either call Costco or Walgreens or Walmart or something and transfer our prescriptions there if it's one that's only a 30-day prescription.
Right.
Maybe to Albuquerque or to...
So there's networks of places that you can get associated with, and Costco's, Walgreens, whatever, that they'll work with you.
Yeah,
and that's true of banking also. We encountered a problem where we were in Alaska. We're actually in British Columbia, headed for Alaska, and we were informed that we had the opportunity to take over a second tour as hosts, but we didn't have the funds. We didn't have anything set up, so we had a bank in Alaska set up to give us the Canadian currency we would need to come back into Canada and retour. So we did 2 tours to Alaska through British Columbia in the same summer. So we were up there for 4.5 months.
So having to make sure that, credit card fraud, you guys are 60 days on the road. How many times do you got to call and say, hey, this is really me. I'm trying to buy 200 gallons of diesel fuel at the Flying J so that I can keep going. How often is that a big deal?
It can be a big deal. We even had a credit card fraud, a credit card canceled on us while we were on the road, and tried to use our card to get fuel and had to do something else, something different, and get a hold of the bank and get it resolved.
So it's kind of scary, but you probably have to pack a certain amount of emergency cash funds just to make sure that if the credit cards go south that you're covered.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you have to think of that in regard to clothing, medicine, cash, funds, and spare parts for the motorhome. And so far we've been lucky. We haven't had a casualty on the motorhome itself where we needed spare parts that we didn't have on board. Thanks to the good service we get here to keep the rig prepared and ready to go.
Yeah.
So, Mel and Nancy, and we kind of jumped around a little bit, but one of the things that I admired about them is they're willing to overcome struggles in their life. Nancy had breast cancer and Mel with his heart. And in 2022, or was it 21, you guys were the first tour out that they allowed to go out from Fantasy, who the company they worked with, and they were the guinea pigs after COVID and how to overcome the COVID challenges and tour throughout the country. Not just gathering a group of 45 people, is that what was on the caravan?
50 people,
50
25
people.
rigs, yeah.
So, 50 people, so many rigs, traveling international because they're going to Canada and back into Alaska, and overcoming all these little hurdles at the age of what?
I'm 81.
80, 75.
73.
Yeah. And so, you're not too young or not too old to be able to work your way through all these unique struggles, and to be the first to go, oh, well, we'll figure it out on the way, is just very admirable. But like when you guys went through the COVID struggle of that very first journey, what were some of the unique challenges that people weren't prepared for that, you wouldn't have thought of it as you took off on that first initial voyage?
It was trying to get across the Canadian border. They had a special app that you had to electronically, with your phone or your computer, you had to sign up and tell them what time you were crossing the border.
For 45 people.
Yeah, and they had to do it themselves. So teaching them how to do the app, and the app wasn't working really well. And every time we went into Canada, we had to sign up and tell them what time we went. We crossed into Canada 7 times on this tour.
Yeah.
And it was that, and a lot of times you didn't have internet. So it was trying to work through the internet and trying to work through the Canadian app to do it. That was the hard part.
What do you think, Mel? What was kind of part of the things and the strategic things? I mean,
personally, it was recognizing that, I better test because I might have COVID, and I did.
Yeah.
And I was stuck in the rig. We were stuck in the rig for 5 days while everybody else was having fun in Denali.
And they happened to be the leader of the adventure, so the dog and them all were quarantined for 5 days, fighting through COVID in their 80s.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, we were the assistants on that particular instance.
They were what's called the tail gunner.
Tail gunners, yeah.
So the leader of the group is called the wagon master,
yeah.
And the one that brings up the back end to make sure everybody gets there is called the tail gunner.
Yep. And the tail gunner's responsibilities is to stay with the group, be behind the slowest person, or at least know where they are, communicate with them, and be sure that everybody gets there safely and help them with their problems. We don't have to be a mechanic. We don't have to solve the problem, but we have to help them find solutions to the problems.
Yeah. Last year's adventure, just before they left, it was their first year, I think, of being the leader of the group, wasn't it? Or second year of being the leader of the group. Second year. And as I was over at their house helping them with a little bit of problem that they were having with some lights, they were fearful of the forest fires throughout the country and how they were going to navigate and know the status of roads that were open and using the apps. And how did the forest fire problem work out for you guys last year?
I don't think we really had a problem as long as we stayed aware of what was happening, where we were going. A number of times we came through areas where we could see the fires burning on the hillsides, and we would be able to get through it. And sometimes they would close roads, and we'd have to take detours with 25 rigs and be sure everybody knew where to go and how to get there.
Yeah, and I've heard horror stories on these detours that they're designed for pickups and small light vehicles, and then you hit these detours with these great big RVs, and trying to navigate these questionable routes can be quite the adventure.
Can be quite the adventure. Yeah. However, luckily, most of the if you're on the Alaskan Highway, all the big trucks are there too, so they have to prepare for those trucks.
Right.
They can drive through a lot rougher stuff that we want to go through. So you have to be careful. But people have a misconception about going to Alaska. They think the roads are horrible. They better have a 4-wheel drive vehicle and so on. 80% of the roads are good. Maybe 90% of the roads are good. 10% of that 10% that aren't good are passable with no trouble. The rest you better slow down to maybe as slow as 5 miles an hour for 15 miles to get through some. And unfortunately, you either go up through Dawson City and cross the ferry across the Yukon River, and to get there, or you go up the Alaska Highway through Destruction Bay and to Tok and cross the Canadian border. That's the worst part. That may be, I would think, 3 or 4% of the roads you're going to travel are bad, and it's because in that section they have frost heaving, and the road is different every year for the maintenance crews, and it's just a big pothole mess.
An ongoing journey of disaster that they got to just overtake.
They have to deal with it constantly.
And you guys usually take off on the late part of May, so it's just past thaw breakup a lot of times, and you guys can see some snow on the sides of the road and stuff in some of the areas still, can't you?
Yeah.
And we're following the thaw north.
And the freeze back.
And the last year, the year before, four and a half months up there, yes, we were following the snow back. We were actually waking up in the morning to see colored leaves and drive south through into the green leaves and say, oh, it's spring again. And then in the morning, it would be fall again, and drive out of fall into back into summer.
Pretty ironic.
It was fun.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit. I know we've touched base on a few things. I'm going to let you guys, you brought a few lists of things, and then let you guys touch about what you want to talk about, and then we'll wrap up with a few more of my questions.
Well, we talked about it a little bit, about extra parts for your rig. Like if you're going to Canada, there's a fair amount of gravel roads and dirt roads, so you have a lot of dust. So you want to make sure that you're bringing air filters. You want to bring a fuel filter. Certain parts, you can get them there. You just can't get them quickly. So if you have them and you do have a breakdown, you always have them with you. So we always carry certain extra parts. And Ernie has helped us, guide us as to what parts we need to bring.
And the difference between the Alaska tour, which is kind of a big boy adventure, and going to the Southern Parks thing when you're going down into Four Corners, what's the dichotomy and the difference of taking maybe this, where you go to the Balloon Festival or Zion or whatever? What's the caliber of adventure travel difference, would you guys call that?
Well, Alaska, when you travel with the company that we contract with, there's a lot of one day overnights when you're in Alaska. So you have a lot of miles, and then you're overnight, and then you have a lot of miles. Again, because you're traveling from here, we drove as far north as Fairbanks, and then through Denali and out to the Kenai. So you have a lot of miles that you're traveling. When we went to the Western National Parks, we had 3 and 4 days, and that tour, 150 miles, was a long day. Huh. So the travel distance between each of the parks is not far.
And the remoteness is not as bad.
So the vehicle preparedness, your assets for oil filter, water filter, fuel filter, air filter is relatively quick compared to what you might find in the Canadian provinces or Alaska.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to be self-sufficient. And one of the things we enjoy and appreciate about traveling with a group, and particularly if it's a group of the same brand of motorhomes, the spare parts are probably available. Somebody's got what you need within that group. If you're alone, you better be prepared with your own stuff.
One question before I let Nancy move on her list. How many flat tires in that group did you guys have in the trip to Alaska in 44 months?
One.
On your own or the whole group?
The whole group. Only one person.
Well, we did have a lot of vehicle damage, mainly the towed vehicles. Towed vehicles, something happened I wouldn't go on the road with a towed vehicle without a tire monitoring system. So I know that the tires on my towed are inflated, not going flat, because a flat tire on the towed will destroy things before you know it. And
you witnessed it
twice.
Yeah.
2 people had their towed destroyed because they didn't have a tire monitor.
We also had the experience of seeing a fellow take his brand new electric pickup to Alaska on a trailer. Very proud. By the time he got home, he was very disappointed in that his trailer broke because the vehicle was so heavy and the roads were so bad. He had to buy a hay trailer to get his rig back home to the States.
You told me this story right after you got home. You said he had an electric vehicle and he had charted out all the places he thought he could charge. How successful was he in all that?
I think he used it once or twice.
The whole time he was on the road?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't keep it charged.
Couldn't keep it charged.
Yeah, and then he would charge off of his rig
Yeah.
at night, or try and charge off of an extra
Yeah,
post in an RV park.
pay for an extra parking space in order to get power to charge his motorhome.
But could hardly use it because he couldn't maintain a charge.
Yeah.
And then he brought an aluminum trailer that didn't survive the journey very well either.
No.
Right, it broke in half. Literally, the welds broke, and he had to have it repaired in Fairbanks. So he traveled a third of the trip without his trailer and car. Not to badmouth him, it was a remote area where it's a lot of weight to be pulling around.
Remote area, and then understanding that it's I wouldn't call it not the civilized world, but it just doesn't have the infrastructure that the rest of the United States has as far as power grid stuff and charging ports and a long ways apart. And those electric cars can only go so many miles, and then you got to get to something, and some of that infrastructure is just not developed up there yet.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And it may be cold weather. So
Yeah, and they don't do real good in cold sometimes.
yeah.
Go ahead, Nancy. You had a few other things.
One of the things is I find that it's not as hard. I prepare foods before we leave, and that's just me, but I find that it's easier when you're trying to put meals together if you've prepared them ahead of time. So like for burgers, I like seasoning my own burgers, so I make them at home and then I compact them easily. So all I have to do is pull out a meal. And I find that really easy when I'm traveling. The other thing is, if you travel north to Canada at all, in Alaska, make sure you bring 3 seasons of clothes. Because you never know whether it's going to be warm, whether it's going to be winter, spring, or summer up there. And so you always want to make sure that you've got what you need, because we've been up there and it snowed in the middle of the summer, so you just never know what the weather is going to be. Most of the stuff on my list we've already gone through. So
That's also true. Packing clothing for 3 seasons, you never know when a rainstorm is going to come through, and if you're at elevation, that could easily turn to snow or the temperature drops. So even down in the Southwest.
Speaking of snow, it's on my talking points. I was going to do it at the end. How many times do you guys have to chain up?
We've never chained up our motorhome, and we always pull a 4-wheel drive vehicle with winter tires, depending on the season when we're going. But a 4-wheel drive can usually get you through anything without having to chain up.
Yeah.
Our Ford Edge, you can't chain up. You can't put chains on it.
Yeah.
So we rely on the 4-wheel drive.
Right.
Or
Good.
all-wheel drive.
All-wheel drive, yeah. Cool. Mel, did you have any talking points, things that you wanted to bring up?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is we used, up until this winter, we used our motorhome summer and winter and never winterized it. This is the first year I've winterized my motorhome, so I'm going to be de-winterizing here probably in 5 or 6 weeks, and that'll be a new experience for me. I'm learning so much about the motorhome.
In 21 years, you've used your motorhome every winter.
Every winter skiing. Yeah, because
or 23 years, I should say.
We've skied. I started teaching skiing part-time, not every winter, but in 1975. I got certified skiing as a ski instructor in Mount Baker. And I've moved all over the country since then. But this is the first winter we've not used our motorhome in the winter.
yeah.
Not on the RVing topic, but proud, admirable thing that Nancy. How many years did you get awarded for working in the aid room at White Pass?
12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were kind enough to give me a lifetime pass when I retired. They didn't think that I would ever retire, and I finally told them no, I needed to retire.
Yeah. In my background, I've been humbled by this RV experience in maintaining and knowing how to operate it and how to appreciate it. I was on nuclear submarines. I was on the first class of nuclear submarines after the Nautilus, and I thought I knew how to do things, but this motorhome I'm learning so much as I go along. In fact, we gathered magazines from our motorhome club, and I've just gone through and taken all the pages out, which is the technical advice that they had in the magazines that I didn't pay really close attention to. So I've got a lot of questions for you, Ernie, by the time we get this thing ready to go again this spring.
Yeah, well, that's good. So the new either 40-year-old, 30-year-old, it's a trend that people are wanting to take off. It's an amazing world we live in where people are telecommuting, and so people are living all over the country. I have a couple of customers that they live here, Alaska, Puerto Rico, all over the place. But if somebody were wanting to take off on a life adventure to drive all over the country and live, what would be some of the pieces of advice that you would think of that they should probably consider that most people wouldn't think about? Because you guys have spent hundreds of days on the road in your RV in the last several years. What would be one thing that you would think is a thing that you wouldn't be aware of that maybe you didn't know about in the beginning? You know, you go, this is a nugget that everybody should know. Is it, how to deal with the toilet situation in Blackwater, or how to be 50 amp, just kind of the RV lifestyle. What is unique about it that's something that you take for granted now, but in the beginning you're like, wow, I wish I'd have known that in the beginning.
Wow.
It's been so long you don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, our new rig is so different than our old rig.
Right.
Our old rig was a 2007. So when we were learning it was like, how do you maintain the slides? Now, I don't do that. I don't do the outside stuff. He does the outside stuff. I do the inside stuff. So I've watched him do it, like dump the black tanks. So if I ever had to do that, I can do that. But for the inside, it's like how to maintain it, and you can't keep it dust free, but keep it fairly clean. So I'm pretty meticulous inside the rig where I'm not necessarily at home. But you have to have things in its place, because when you get ready to leave, you pull the slides in and you go. So that would be the thing. You have to make sure, cookware, all of my cookware is nesting, because you have limited space on where you're going to put things. So that was the one thing when we first got our first rig, is that I bought all these bowls and pots and pans that all are nested together. So all of my cookware is in the size of a Dutch oven.
One of the things that I find in a lot of the customers' rigs that I move around, and I admire how Nancy keeps hers so well, meticulously organized and things put away, and Mel being in a ship, is that if you're driving down the road and you get in a small fender bender and you go from 30 to 0, that's a pretty significant collision. But if you get into a major collision from 60 to 0, all of those items that are stored and packed in the back become projectiles that will hit you in the back of the head and kill you faster than anything in the front. And so a lot of people take it for granted that they leave their coffee pot on the counter, or this on the counter, or that. And those heavy objects become projectiles that can just take you out if you were to get in an accident. And a lot of people don't think of those sorts of things. And Mel and Nancy, I know that's one thing that they're from their military background, it's stowed away and nice and tight and well kept for the most part.
For the most part, our coffee pot sits on the counter.
Yeah.
But everything else
Ernie.
once we stop, everything else goes in the sink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or in a cupboard.
Yeah.
So when we get ready to travel, we go through and we put everything in the sink, so it's not going to fly. Because we travel with our dog. Our dog sleeps in the back while we're driving, so we hope he doesn't get thrown around at all. But he doesn't go into a cage because he doesn't like cages.
He's a 60-pound dog.
Yeah.
British Spaniel.
Yeah.
Beautiful dog. He's special. He's a special dog.
He is very special.
So, but that's what we do. Some people feel that they are really intimidated about cooking in their rig. all the rigs, it doesn't matter what manufacturer, they have a microwave convection oven. And so I find that I bake the same in it as I do at home. So it really is no difference. You just have to do it in a smaller portion, whatever you're cooking.
The big difference you have to deal with is that you're oftentimes feeding 50 people
Well, yeah.
instead of 2.
So
So that's a
yeah.
task. It amazes me that people can do that.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we are leading a tour and we're feeding 50 people, we cook while we're traveling because we will put depending on what we're cooking, we'll put it in a roaster oven and plug it into the inverter. So it slow cooks the whole day as we're traveling. So when you get there, you're not trying to throw together a meal for 50 people.
And we have it sitting in the shower with the door closed. So in case it does spill.
It's not the
contained.
projectile, it's the mess containment. But it's that Navy background of coming up with ways to solve it in case an incident does happen.
Yeah, not so much Navy is just you quickly become aware of things RVing.
Yeah. So what would be something you would tell a young adventurer just getting started, Mel? I mean, you guys have 20-some years of doing this that you didn't think of, and now you take it for granted.
This one I don't take it for granted. I did take it for granted until I learned the hard way. Going down a long hill with a big motorhome, you need to understand your brakes to slow that thing down and not damage your brakes and maybe save yourself.
So one thing that Mel, and we'll kind of go into the technical weeds, and if you ever watch NASCAR or some of the major racing, as you ride your brakes, your brake fluid only can handle a certain amount of temperature, and then it starts boiling off and dissipating its ability to press on the caliper, and the brakes get so hot. Big trucks are really renowned for it. If you're going down these steep grades, Dead Man's Pass in Oregon, they've got these runaways that if you lose control, you go into a gravel little pit and it'll slow you down because your brakes have faded to a certain extent. And people like us that are the general RVers hit the road and we're like, we're having fun and not aware of, there's no class you take to learn how to RV. There's no class you take to learn how to drive these big, there's no licensing requirement. And so sometimes people don't understand the gravity of what could happen if you don't pay attention. And so there's a learning curve, and definitely the brakes is one of them that people need to be aware of.
Yes. And towing a vehicle. You're towing a 4,500-pound vehicle on a tow system behind your 45 or 50,000-pound rig. I'm not sure I've got those numbers correct, but that's a lot of weight, and you have to be able to deal with it.
Yeah. Stopping, going slow up a mountain is insignificant. Going slow down the mountain is significant.
Yes. And the braking system on your engine.
Yeah.
That's going to assist you in slowing down so you don't have to use your brakes.
Right.
Is big. And the transmission, gearing down the transmission.
Right.
I keep coming back to that because that scared the heck out of me once.
Oh, yeah. And in the lower 48, there's still lots of areas like that people can run into those, for instances. Also, it isn't just Alaska. It isn't just the major, excursions. And to be aware of your brakes and be aware of being prepared and knowing the kind of journey. Some of the other things I would bring up that people are not aware of is we're also used to driving a little car. And your overall clearance and knowing what you can fit underneath.
Yep.
And knowing that the road you're traveling, you might have traveled a long ways and you take it for granted that the road's open, but can you get through it? It could be trees, it could be a bridge, it could be whatever. Can you fit on a ferry? Is the ferry you're approaching to get on, is it have the right capacities? And things like that you just are things that you don't necessarily think of naturally because you subconsciously just drive a car and everybody else is doing it, so why can't I?
Yep.
We had that happen one time.
Did you?
Yeah, in our first rig, we were in Oregon and we were following the road, and we didn't realize that there was a small tunnel
Trestle.
and we got down there, and we were 2 inches taller than the trestle, than the hole to go through the trestle.
And a few blocks away from that, through a residential area, we thought these people are really friendly because they were all waving at us.
Telling us not
We
to
just
go
kept
there.
going,
Yeah.
and we didn't realize they were telling us, "You're not going to fit under that trestle ahead of you."
Did you guys hit it or did you catch it in time?
No,
we approached it and then had to back away while we held up traffic for a
Yeah,
while. Had to disconnect the car so we could back away, and then back our rig out to where we could turn it around. And
Is there any resources out there that you guys are familiar with? Because I'm not, that tells you, road heights that as you're traveling, or is it just kind of follow where the semis go and then you're shorter than them?
no,
we have a GPS, and it's for RVs. So it'll tell you that the roads that you can go on, that you won't go into the short tunnels and stuff like that. You'll look at it and your phone will say, oh, you can go this way by your GPS, but your motorhome GPS tells you you can't go that way because you have your height and your length and everything.
And weight restrictions.
And
maybe.
weight restrictions in the GPS, so it guides you to the right directions.
I would say the most important thing for somebody starting out with their new RV or starting out RVing, join a club. There are clubs all over the place. The manufacturers all have regional clubs, and if you get into a club, you'll be able to benefit from the experience and the knowledge of other people who've been doing it for years.
Well, I could sit here and talk to you two for hours because I love you both so much, but we'll put a bow on this and kind of wrap it up. And I really want to say thank you for being on my first show, and it was a lot of fun. I hope that people will learn from our conversation and that they'll find some solid knowledge, and we can share it with the community, and that somebody will learn from Mel and Nancy's adventures, and if they are interested in any of them, maybe they can reach out to us. So have a great day, and thank you.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.